A number of you have been practicing this for a while now. I think you'll find that you're starting to develop that skill of being able to let go. Some people starting to understand that? And you feel that the more you let go, the deeper that peacefulness that comes up is, regardless of disturbance around you. Are you finding that? Can you see where that's leading? Notice that every time you give up your interaction with the world, every time you give up your curiosity or commenting on that sound, every time you give up your interaction with that thought, the mind goes to a deeper level of peace. Can you see what I mean? But if you give that thought value, what happens? What happens to that peace? It goes, doesn't it? Do you notice that?
Yeah.
Now that peacefulness has a flavour to it, doesn't it? Anybody who hasn't tasted it, it's not out of your reach. This is natural for any human being. Everybody can do it. And so far I've seen in all my classes and all the years of teaching that anybody who persists will experience it, and their mind will quieten down. It will settle. So the question is, since we've been looking at thinking, why do we enjoy thinking so much? And why do we give it such a high value? We give it an extreme value. Even in our society, we worship it. The people who think the most are the people who we worship the most. They're the people in power. The more that people think, the better we think they are. But what if we found out that obsessive thinking, this continuous thinking, was actually insanity? Would it mean that we're being led by the insane?
Oh, we are.
If you look at in the world, you look at all the problems, the results are coming through thinking. All these wars, people attacking people. It's all coming through obsessive thinking, believing the story and acting on it. So the last few weeks we've been doing exercises that you can use in your mindfulness practice. If you haven't seen them on the Meditation the Shy website, there's videos of them. Yeah. Exercises you can use to train your ability to observe thinking rather than be lost in it. When you watch it, you start to understand what's going on. If on the level of the story, if we're lost in the story, we don't realise who's driving the car. We think we're driving the car. But when you really look, you see that we're not actually driving that thought. So who here had thinking arise during that meditation practice just then? Who here is not willing to admit that they just did? Because I didn't see all the hands go up. Of those of you that had thinking arise, which was only a few of you, who here had control over when that thought came up?
I did more so this time.
You were controlling the thinking coming up.
No, you mean you were controlling it.
But you couldn't control when it came up. No control whatsoever. Absolutely none. So if you're not controlling when it comes up, what makes you think that you were thinking that thought? Interesting. So this brings us to the question, what's driving that? What's driving it? And we looked over the last few weeks, we started to notice that behind every thought that comes up is an emotional charge that has come from the past, and it's driving the thought now, in the present. It's very, very interesting. So today we're looking at Yoniso Manasikara. So wise attention, but we will call it appropriate attention for what we're looking at today. So the Buddha said, with regard to internal factors, I do not envision any other single factor like appropriate attention as doing so much for a meditator in training who has not attained the heart's goal but remains intent on the unsurpassed safety from bondage. A meditator who attends appropriately abandons what is unskillful and develops what is skillful. And he also said, whatever action you intend to perform by body, speech or mind, you should consider that action. If, in considering it, you realise, this action which I intend to perform will be harmful to myself or harmful to others or harmful to both. It will be an unwholesome action producing suffering, resulting in suffering. Then you should certainly not perform that action. So this is in thought, speech, action, which is the order it goes in, isn't it? We think it, we say it, we do it. Yeah. So he's talking about structuring our attention, not just to watch the breath coming in and out. Not just to watch the thought, but also to reflect on, is this thought worth my time? Now, if I'm thinking a thought, right? Something's happened, I've been shocked, I feel irritated, I believe that somebody outside or something outside has made me irritated, okay? And I react to that feeling and I become angry. And I walk away from that situation, I'm thinking the thought, I wish they would, yeah? Start arguing with them in my head. That type of thought, will that lead to your happiness by thinking that thought?
No.
It's obvious, but we do it. Will that lead to their happiness, that thinking of that thought?
No.
If I see something that I desire, something I really like, and my heart starts longing for it, the thought comes up, I really want that, I must have that. Does thinking that thought lead to my happiness? If it's another person I'm attracted to, is it going to lead to their happiness? Or if you have high stakes on yourself, you might think it will. But really, in reality, when we feel like that towards another person, we don't see a person, we see a thing. We don't see the person. Hence, pornography is really big in our society, because we don't see a person, we see a thing. It doesn't lead to anyone's happiness. So, when these thoughts come up, if we think and we identify with every thought, we'll start thinking in a way that will actually lead to pain every single time. So learning to observe the thought and reflecting, will this lead to my happiness? Will this lead to the happiness of others? Or will it lead to my harm and the harm of others? And this is how the Buddha talked about reflecting. So notice at this point here, we're actually choosing what we think. We're choosing what we're thinking about. We're choosing what we're participating in. If I walk past a beggar on the street, my heart opens for a second and then suddenly it closes and says, no, I won't give them anything. They're going to spend it on alcohol, they're going to spend it on drugs, they're going to this. There will always be some excuse comes up. And your heart suddenly closes. Anyone's experienced that? Yeah. Yeah. That thinking of stinginess, is that going to lead to my happiness? Is that going to make me a more generous person? That thinking of stinginess, is that going to make the other person happy? No. See, all these sort of negative thinkings are contractions. They're contractions from the world. Notice that. They're all contractions. If I'm thinking in a way that's generous, thinking about how can I help this person, get down on the street, make eye contact with them and give and talk to them, is that going to lead to my happiness? The happiness of my own heart? Yeah. Is it going to lead to the happiness of the other person? Yes. We have to be careful what we're thinking about. We can't control, and we've seen that in the practice, we can't control what comes up, but we can choose what we participate in and what we believe. We can choose that. What do you want to cultivate? What do you want to practice? Remember, when you're thinking in a certain way, you are practicing it. If I'm thinking in a selfish way, I am practicing selfishness. Because when I think in that way, my heart moves in a contraction and I close off to everyone around me. Don't I? I think I'm being smart. I think I'm saving money, but I'm selling myself. I'm selling my own happiness for that money. If I think in a way that's really generous, the heart opens. That thinking opens the heart. So I'm practicing being generous. And my heart opens to everyone and everything. Can you see? If I'm thinking in an angry way, my heart is closing, it reacts to that thinking. I am practicing it. I'm becoming good at it. When you're doing this mindfulness practice, you'll start to notice that not only can we practice mindfulness, we can also practice being generous. We practice being compassionate. We practice being kind and loving. It's not just default, I'm born as a human being, so at heart I'm compassionate, I'm kind, I'm loving. It's not like that. You might have those tendencies. They might have been, some of them might have been handed down through your genetics, through your parents. Others have been trained to you, you've been trained in them as you've been brought up. But we're all trained at all different levels. If we're not practicing them, they will not grow. If I get angry and I act on it, I am practicing being angry. I'm becoming good at being angry. I'm planning the potential that in the future I will again become angry. If I feel averse and scared of a situation, if I believe that thought, believe those feelings and I react on them, I am practicing them. I am reinforcing them. I'm putting the potential that in the future, that is how I will experience life again. That is what will be triggered off when a situation arises. Everything is practiced. Now this in a way is scary. From the level of delusion, it's scary. So this means if we believe every thought that comes up, if we participate in every thought that comes up, through delusion, that means we can't see that we actually have a choice. We can't see that a pleasant feeling is just a pleasant feeling, that an unpleasant feeling is just an unpleasant feeling. They have potential for reaction, but you don't actually have to react to them. If we can't see that, right, then our life goes off on a tangent that leads to our unhappiness, and we think that we're actually doing things that are smart, leading to our happiness. There's been a series of robberies in Sydney. There's a lot lately, isn't there? Violent robberies. The people performing these robberies, are they doing these robberies because they think that it will lead to their unhappiness? What are they thinking?
If they have the money, they'll be happy.
They think, when I get this, I will be happy. When I get this, then we will have a big party. We'll have a great time with all my mates. We're going to have a great time. They're deluded. They're caught up in deep delusion. They believe with all their heart that what they're doing is going to make them happy. But really what they're doing is isolating them from society, which will make them more unhappy. So then they'll keep trying to do things through this delusion to make themselves happier, and it will get worse and worse and their life will collapse. That's what karma is. That's real karma. But understand this, it doesn't mean they're bad people. They are not bad people. They're just people making bad decisions. They're making bad choices. At heart, everybody wants to be happy. Every being on this planet wants a happy, peaceful life. But just most of them are deluded and they can't see where happiness really lies. And so they're acting through that delusion. So what mindfulness does, by building up mindfulness, it actually breaks that fog of delusion. By watching the thinking process, we're seeing what's really going on. Watching our relationship to it, we understand what's going on, then we make informed decisions, and then we can ask the question, once we've developed that mindfulness, will thinking this thought lead to my happiness or the happiness of others? Or will it lead to my unhappiness or the unhappiness of others? Then we choose what we participate in. Remember, if you're thinking that thought, your heart will respond. You'll respond by closing, or you'll respond by opening. It's one movement or the other, isn't it? What type of person do you want to be? That's the question. Because it's practiced. But in this way, since it's practice, it can be unpracticed. Anything you're experiencing at the moment is only there because you're practicing it. As mindfulness grows, you learn to retrain that. And your perception of the world shifts. It completely shifts. So there's a really interesting line that I'll just wrap up with here that I just want to mention to you. It's this one. The Buddha talks about reflecting on whether it's harmful to yourself and harmful to others. Why? Why not just if it's harmful to myself? Why not just if it leads to my happiness or my unhappiness? Because we live in a democracy, so in a democracy the individual is the most important, isn't it? The rights of the individual. So it should be about my happiness. The Buddha doesn't see people as being individuals. The Buddha sees people as being a series of interconnected relationships. We cannot not be in relationship with others. We are in relationship with the others, and we're in relationship with the world. It's our relationships. If we have a bad relationship, what's it like to be in a bad relationship? With one person. What's it like to be in a bad relationship with the world? It's the same thing, isn't it? It's the same thing. The reason is, if it's just for myself, then I might think, well, robbing that convenience store will lead to my happiness. So if it's just based on what leads to my happiness or my unhappiness, the choice can always be influenced by delusion. But if it's based on what will lead to my happiness and the happiness of the other, or what will lead to my unhappiness and the unhappiness of the other, this always has a check that brings about mindfulness. When I rob that convenience store, I might think I'm bringing happiness to myself, but I'll be bringing unhappiness to another person. It always goes hand in hand like this. You can't separate it. When I'm thinking of the individual, my happiness will always be somebody else's loss. As I become richer, somebody else in the world is becoming poorer. This is the way it works. When you're saving a few cents at the supermarket, there's somebody in another country that's not feeding their family tonight. This is the way it works. We all want a tax break, but we also all want the libraries and the hospitals and the streets and the stuff like that. What's in it at tax time for me? What's in it for me? Oh, a tax cut for me. And then we'll spend the next year whinging about how, the roads are breaking up and the street lights aren't working and we haven't got enough beds in the hospital. This is thinking about the individual. It's based on delusion. If I'm being really generous, I'm going out doing heaps of community work, helping heaps of people, going to my family, putting myself out for my children, my spouse, everything like that, and destroying myself at the same time. Does this sound familiar? Not being kind to myself. People do this a lot. They give, but they don't like themselves, or they're not kind to themselves, and they start to get sick themselves. That again is based on delusion. So if you ask the question, for my benefit and the benefit of the other, automatically that brings it into balance. So you can be really generous, but you also have to think about yourself. You can only give so much. So in balance, it has to work with both, not just one. So it brings it. So he always introduces community into it. Community is important. And so in this way you reflect. So that's wise attention. Appropriate attention. Where do you place your attention? Do I place my attention on the happiness of my relationship with my wife, or do I place my attention on what I can get out of that girl next door? The way I'm placing my attention is going to lead two different paths. Mindfulness tells us which one causes the heart to close, which one causes the heart to open. This is what we've been doing the last few weeks by observing thinking and what's driving it. So we have the tools, not just in formal practice, but in everyday life to make the right decisions. One's based on information, not one based on delusion.